in terms of.
Okay.
Start again. Some of the things that you were saying there, Mary, had deep resonance with me, because obviously we've been working with colleagues both in the north and the south in looking at the whole need for a strategy for play. And as you rightly said, back in 2006, I think it was, the Ready Steady Play strategy and the Teen Space strategy that were developed in the south were two documents that we would have played a role in helping shape and form. But there's been nothing happened for a very, very, very long time. So we're in early doors conversations with the department around the need to revisit the strategy framework. And we're also at the point where, in terms of the early years agenda now, we're actually going to have a joint post with the National Childcare Network and looking at how they can, I suppose, both inform and shape the childcare agenda, but also look at the policy agenda and for outdoor recreation for children and young people. So, I mean, that post actually is going to go live on the 1st of April. So it's maybe something just to be cognizant of and for us maybe to continue the dialogue. I'm very conscious, guys, that you are all very, very well informed practitioners and know play as probably as much as I do. But Peter and I, when we were trying to craft today's presentation, we thought to ourselves, well, you know, it is the start of a dialogue. It is the start of a journey. So we probably need to touch base a little bit and just give an overview. So if you'll indulge me, I'm not trying to teach my granny to suck eggs, but if you'll indulge me, I'll give you a little bit of background about the organisation, a couple of slides looking at that, and then we'll sort of spend a little bit of time looking at play and the purpose of play and the value of play. And then very quickly, we'll hand over to Peter, who will spend a little bit more time looking at the links between the youth work and the Playwork agenda, and possibly how we can take things forward. So if that meets your needs, we'll kick on. So in terms of Playboard, you know, often, I never forget this date, 1985, because it also coincides with my wedding. So 37 years old this year. I'm 37 years married this year. So I can't never forget it. But the organisation, I suppose, was born out of grassroots activity. It was basically parents who were saying there's not enough going on for our children and young people. And I suppose also when you look at the history of the Troubles in Northern Ireland and the backdrop of that, it was clear to see that, you know, children were being, I suppose, curtailed in where they played, how they played and who they played with. So it was actually the establishment of the organisation came very much from that grassroots activity. We are a long-standing member of the Youthwork family. And as my colleagues in EA will know, it's been a long journey of really trying to, I suppose, impart or drive through the fact that, you know, the younger age range, although youth work is incredibly useful, their need to play needs to take precedent. So in terms of, I was reading an old document quite recently which highlighted that actually in 1985, whenever youth work was looking at the age range, and so in the north, the age range is 4 to 25. But at that juncture, it actually highlights that Playboard and Playwork were being assimilated into the Youthwork family to ensure the needs of the younger child were met. So, you know, going way back all those years ago, this conversation was kicking off, and it still is in early, you know, it's in early days, but certainly in the latter years, I've seen a real demand and desire to actually look at what the needs of the younger cohort of children in the youth sector family require. So we're the leading NGO for the development and promotion of children and young people's play in the north. We work, as Mary has highlighted, we work at a number of levels. We work with policy. We're currently working with our department colleagues on the children and young people strategy and the rollout of the outcome, which is contained in that for play and leisure. But we also work with groups on the ground, and we also work directly face-to-face with children and young people. So I suppose our knowledge base is very much driven from the participation and the engagement of the players themselves, the children. We're a rights-based organisation underpinned by Article 31, often referred to as the forgotten right. But Article 31 in many ways is also referred to as the linchpin of the other rights of all the other 54 articles, because of the fundamental nature of childhood, because play is so intrinsic to the need for development and growth and learning in a child. It is often said that it's the linchpin of all of the other rights. Indeed, Laura Lundy, and I know you'll be familiar with Laura's work in terms of participation, Laura is also a great advocate for the child's right to play. And it was actually what her was saying that play should be, Article 31 should be seen at the centre of all of the other rights. So moving swiftly on. We're a membership body. Our mandate comes from our membership. Our membership is currently sitting at over 1,200, really big membership, diverse membership, councils, schools, colleges, youth workers, play workers, parents, children themselves. It is quite broad, and it's free. So if anyone wants to look up our membership, please do so. Delighted to have you on board. We do have a considerable number of members who are from the Republic of Ireland as well, because we've been doing a considerable amount of work in terms of, as I said, strategy development, but also in terms of training. And we're currently working with a couple of councils. We've worked with Cork County Council on their child-friendly initiative. We've been working with Kerry Council in terms of their play strategy, and we're currently working with Louth and Waterford in the development of play strategy as well. So our work has become more and more prevalent in the Republic of Ireland as well. We're an accredited training provider. We work with employers, we work with practitioners, the awarding bodies, colleges, universities, to ensure that the qualifications for the sector are fit for purpose. And Peter would take a lot of that work forward. He would drive a lot of that through the organisation. We also are the convener of the Northern Ireland branch of the Playwork Education and Training Council. Commonly we call it PETSI. So there are PETSIs in Scotland, Wales and England. And we are the secretariat and convener of that branch. And again, working on a broad base to ensure qualifications are fit for purpose for the sector. We also represent play and playwork on 4 nation groupings, the Children's Play Policy Forum and the Play Safety Forum. And of course, we also chair the Northern Ireland branch of the International Play Association. Next week, the Children's Play Policy Forum and Play Safety Forum are hosting a policy meeting with policy officers across the 4 nations. And we're about to launch an inclusive, high-level statement on inclusive practice for children and young people. So, of course, when that's developed next week, we can share it with Mary and the team. So that's who we are in a nutshell. I probably could talk wax lyrical for a long time on this, but there's no point in doing that. Hopefully this is the start of a conversation that we can take forward. And if you want to know more about us as we go forward, we're happy to share that. So in trying to think, again, I'm going to talk about play and the importance of play, but I just thought to myself, we're all experts in play, because the very fact that we were all children ourselves, we've all played, it was fundamental to how we grew and developed. And I would like just to spend a wee minute or two, I know we don't have an awful lot of time, but just cast your mind back. Think back to a period of time. Think about when you were 7, 8, 9, 10. What were the sorts of things that you were getting up to? What were you doing? Who were you playing with? Was there adults there, or were you on your own? I'm happy, I don't know if we can use the chat function, Joe, but I'm happy if people wanted to, just as we're going through some of this, even if you capture some thoughts, just pop them into the chat function.
Chat function's open, yeah.
Peter sent me, I think it was Peter had sent through a WhatsApp quite just before lunchtime to the whole staff team on Playboard. And it basically was saying, do you remember back to when you were a child, your mummy thought you were cycling around the block for about 8 cycles, but actually you were 5 miles away. And you were probably in a derelict building, getting up to something that you shouldn't be getting up to. And look at the fun you were having. You were probably lighting a fire, doing something that you should not have actually been doing. So I just wanted to do that because I think it sort of locates us in a time and a space and makes us think about what we're having to do now, or what we're trying to think about doing now, and why play is so important.
Jackie, I'll just share with you some of the things that people said. Playing outside, particularly in the trees with my brother and friends, no parents around. Crucially, we were building huts. We played in the street and in the park. There were no adults present, bit of a theme coming through. Jumping off sand dunes, that was me actually saying that. I remember jumping off sand dunes. at the beach. What a great space for play. Kirby. Now there's the start of a conversation as to whether we're talking about Kirby or who said that. Gillian, you said that on purpose, didn't you? Just to get, oh, I see, it was Gemma, just to get people discussing as to whether it was Kirby or Cribsy or whatever. Playing in local fields with friends, no parents around either. Yeah, with lots of scope to explore. The boundaries were much wider, weren't they? Gathering blackberries and building huts, not where parents were. Completely purple. Ooh, I presume you're talking about the blackberries. Making up games with friends that we had. So it's not just about doing what other people tell you to do and construct in terms of their games. It's about developing your own and building dens with other children in the street and on your own without adults, playing down the beach, living near it, no parents, perfect place for children playing outside again. So a big theme about no adults and playing outside and doing our own thing. We knew when to be home for dinner because you got hungry. Absolutely. Climbing trees, running with friends and brothers, out all hours and no sunscreen in sight. Absolutely. Those are the days with sun. Playing and chasing and hide and seek. What a great game hide and seek is. So many variations. It's fab. Climbing trees, going fishing with a stick and a piece of string and a fish hook. So making your own play tools and climbing trees, the risks and so on that were involved in our play in terms of jumping off sand dunes and climbing trees and so on, running. So a lot of physical play, freedom, very important in terms of no adults around, but the sense of feeling free as well. And another F, football. I mean, I'll always remember watching the FA Cup final and it was the only match that was really live on TV and going out with my brother and playing football at half time and so on. Fantastic. Getting out and staying out, only come in for food, riding bikes. Yeah, so the exhilaration you get from riding bikes with friends or going to the park. So being outside again, out playing all day and straight home once the street lights come on. Those are the indicators. So you can see the key themes there about being outside, being on your own, no adults, so managing and directing the play yourself, taking a wee bit of risk, and the boundaries for the play being much, much broader than maybe they are today. Oh, and joking about mum and dad, only play role jokes, total freedom, no TV license, no bills, just freedom, no internet, just fun. There's another F. Those are key Fs, aren't they? Freedom and fun. We talk about, in Playwork, we talk about flexibility as well. The flexibility, not just in terms of your play, but in terms of your brain and how it enables your brain to develop as a result of playing. Fantastic.
Thanks, guys. I mean, to be honest with you, wow, was what I can say. I mean, that was a really great exercise. I didn't think that you would participate just as well. So thank you so much for that. But it does, as Peter said, it sort of just really reinforces the emotion that it evokes in us, even as adults, about when we were children, what we were playing. So why is it so important for children now? If you move on swiftly there, Peter, just in terms of what I've used here is a couple of definitions. The next two slides sort of talk about the definitions of play. And this first one actually is from the general comments. So I talked earlier on that we were a rights-based organisation. Back in 2013, the UN committee actually developed a general comment on the right to play. So general comment 17, and I'd encourage you to have a look at it. It's a really easy to read document. It's one of my favorite general comments. But what it says is the children's play is any behavior, activity, or process initiated, controlled, and structured by the children themselves. It takes place wherever opportunities rise. So that really reinforces what we just said there in terms of what actually play is. But I think importantly, it also tells what play is not. So if you move on to the next one, Peter. So this one comes from the National Occupational Standards for Playwork. And it says that play is children's behavior that's freely chosen, personally directed, and intrinsically motivated. It is performed for no external goal or reward, and is fundamental and integral part of a healthy development, not only for the individual child, but also for society in which they live. So big statement there. But what it's really saying is that the drive for play, the biological drive for play comes intrinsically from the child. It's something that, you know, we often talk about in terms of evolution. You know, if play wasn't important, we wouldn't be doing it any longer, but it is important and we still do it, and our children need to do it. But what it isn't then, once we start directing play, it doesn't play any longer. It becomes something else. So when Peter and I would be delivering training about play, we would talk about the Playwork the play continuum. So at one end of the continuum, you have complete freedom, and at the other end is quite didactic. You know, so one end could be quite chaotic and possibly a bit risky, but at the other end is quite structured and quite didactic, and adults are leading on it. So when we're talking about it, we're starting to think, where are we on the continuum? And when we're linking youth work and play work, we think about the adult, the intervening adult, the person who actually facilitates the play, provides the conditions for the play, provides the novelty for the play to happen and to be extended. So where is that on that continuum? Are we directing it? Are we adulterating it? Or are we letting it get too loose? You know, so we need to just think about that in terms of what play is, but what it isn't as well. So in terms of the value for play, of course, I mean, we could wax lyrical here for days about the value of play. You know, we know it improves the cognitive, the physical, the social, the emotional well-being of children and young people. It's how children learn about the world and how they learn to the skills, the need for study and for building relationships. So we've put a couple of headings here in terms of bullet points, but you know, there's lots and lots of research emerging from a range of academic disciplines, I have to say. You know, so it's not just developmental psychology. It's, you know, there's a whole raft of areas that are being looked at in terms of the benefits of play. So when we talk about neurological, you know, making brain connections, you know, the plasticity of the brain, you know, what we've actually seen in studies of children at play. Now, studies that weren't actually contrived for looking at play, they were maybe looking at learning and the outcome of learning. But what was discovered when children were at play, there was more synapses being formed in the play process than there actually was in the learning process. So that was an interesting find. It actually releases a chemical in the brain, BDNF, which is the chemical that's really needed for healthy growth and development of brain cells. So in terms of the cognitive benefits, of course, you know, children learn to understand about the world, it improves memory, it stimulates the growth of the cerebral cortex. It's been proven that children actually pay more attention to academic tasks when they're given frequent, brief interludes of free play. The physical benefits, we all know the physical benefits. You know, we hear this all the time by children being fitness, their strength, their balance, their dexterity, their coordination, their self-confidence. But of course, physical play also allows children to burn off excess energy, and it can help with mood regulation. So it's really important from that perspective, their mental health and well-being. Of course, then in terms of the emotional benefits, play facilitates exposure to uncertainty. And I often describe this as vulnerability. And we all know what that feels like, you know, that unstable feeling that we get when we step out of our comfort zones, or we have to do something that forces us to loosen our control a little bit like me today. The imaginative play, the what if scenarios allow children to deal with uncertainty. They allow them to deal with emotional risk and emotional exposure without the risks associated with it. So you can do it in a safe environment. Is there another one there, Peter? No. So in terms of, you know, what we've said, it's a biological imperative for children to play. And all of these windfall benefits, if play is facilitated and delivered, it contributes to all aspects of learning. It's a form of participation in everyday life, and it's intrinsic to the value of the child, not purely in terms of their enjoyment, but it also affords them all of the opportunities to grow and develop and to test their boundaries, to see if they're when to lead and when to follow. In terms of the International Play Association, just in conclusion, I think given obviously the awful situation that we find ourselves in as a result of the war in Ukraine, and I'm really, you know, frustrated in terms of looking at the needs of children in that context, but also in the recent corona epidemic that we've had. You know, what we've found is that our children and young people have been very good. I think they've obeyed the rules, they've followed the instruction, but I think what we're storing up is a huge mental and emotional problems for the future. So I think we need to be very, very concerned about that and think about how we can use play as a mechanism to help support children in the future. And again, just reiterating, staying emotionally healthy, helping them relax, be physically active, getting exercise, forgetting about their worries, making sense of new experiences and the changes in the world, and helping them to cope with difficult and frightening situations. We did a piece of research through the COVID pandemic, really engaging with children themselves. I was very, very keen that we heard from the children, not from parents, not from other adults, but the children's voices themselves. And I mean, the things they were telling us about their concerns, their worries, you know, would teachers have forgotten them? Would the youth workers have forgotten them? Would their peers have forgotten them? You know, how to cope in this new world. It was very, very, very distressing. So I think if we can provide, you know, some respite and play for children, we were halfway there. So I'm going to stop at this juncture because Peter's going to now move on into play work. So we often say the play is the super power. And now we're going to look at how the superheroes who can help facilitate that superpower. Over to you, Peter.
Thank you, Jackie. Happy days. I mean, so there's a real strong statement about what play is, what the best play of all is. The play that we remember from our childhood is what we remember. Therefore, it must be memorable, and that means it must be the best play of all. So those are some of the kind of things that constitute a high play value. And of course, what we're wanting to do is all the time meet the needs of young people, the appropriate needs of young people, age-related needs of young people. And we'll all recognize then that particularly for younger kids, meeting their play needs is the most important thing that we do. So how can we learn from the people who make play work in terms of meeting those play needs? Well, a picture tells 1,000 words. There's a lovely picture for you. I'll not tell you how long it took me to create those wonderful 3 pillars of play work. But what it does is it kind of represents what people who make play work, we call them play workers, what people who make play work for children, how they set about going and doing that. Of course, a key pillar to it is play itself. And we've just identified, and that will resonate with you, I'm sure, as youth workers, particularly those of you who work with a younger age group will recognize how valuable it is to pay attention to the play needs of children. So, of course, there are the play needs, and as a play worker and as a youth worker, you'll need to pay attention to those. But there are 2 other pillars of play work that you need to pay attention to as well. And again, this will not come as a shock to you as youth workers, particularly the first one, people. Youth work is relational. Youth work is about developing relationships with people in order to help them develop themselves. And play and play work is no different. As a play worker, you need to develop relationships with the children and young people, as well as their parents, as well as the other professionals, as well as your colleagues and so on, in order to make play work for kids. So it's not just about play, it's about people as well. And finally, it's the place where those things take place, the place where children get the opportunity to play. We just said that the best place of all for children to play is outside. So that in itself is a real strong message to us as youth workers and as play workers as to where we can best make play happen for children. Now, just like youth work, play work has its own set of principles, and they underpin what play workers do. They underpin how workers make play happen. Play workers make play happen for kids. And those principles, 8 principles of all, if you like, establish the professional and ethical framework. That's what makes play work distinct from any other approach for work with children. Describe what's unique about play and play work and so on. And of course, we'd spend a wee bit of time. The principals don't have time to do that now, but you're welcome to check out the Playboard website where you'll find this particular document. In fact, Joe will send you a copy of it. Maybe you'd fire it around people along with a copy of the presentation. But very briefly, and when you look at these principles for play work, they will resonate with you in terms of the principles of youth work as well, because we're talking about all children. Jackie mentioned that play was an innate, a natural thing for children to do. And our job as play workers, as your job as youth workers is as well, to meet the needs of all children. We've identified in our own play memories, and Jackie's identified as well in the definitions, the value, the big play value, which is child-led play. And that's something that we need to replicate whenever we're making play happen for children. We need to focus on the play process. We need to recognize that, as you do in youth work, recognize the value of the process rather than the product. And that's sometimes difficult in an outcome-based world. But all you have to do is watch children play to recognize that for lots of children, it's the process that's more important. As they build their big tower of Lego and then knock it down, as an adult, we're looking, oh, why did you knock that down? That's extraordinary. The process of building the tower is what was playful, not the end product. And then other parts of play, the principles of play include us being advocates for play. We believe strongly that play is the most important thing that children do. So we want to advocate it to children, to young people, to adults, and so on, creating the play space where that play takes place, ensuring that we improve our practice, that we provide the best play opportunities for children as possible. And in doing so, recognize the impact that we have on children and their play, making sure that we don't take over their play or interrupt their play, but only intervene when we are extending or adding value to the play. So those are the core principles of play work, and you'll recognize, I'm sure, how much they correlate with some of the principles of youth work as well. Okay, so the principles give us a kind of bedrock, if you like, as to how we make play happen. What does it actually look like then? Well, lots of you here involved in the Scouts and working with juniors and so on will recognize the activities that take place in order to make play happen. We call it a Playwork Curriculum. What we're trying to say is that if you focus on play, then all those other things like development and learning and self-awareness and confidence and all those things will take care of itself. But there are two principles that are attached to that. The first one is that the play needs to be child-led. We've talked about that already. But the second thing is that the play needs to be broad. There needs to be a good range of play available for the children to choose to do. Otherwise, their development, their learning, their experience, and their fun will be limited. So we have a couple of kind of frameworks to help us ensure that there's a good range of play available. We've got the Playwork Curriculum. I have to move you guys over so I can see what it says here. So the Playwork Curriculum focuses on the following categories, the elements. We want to make sure that what the children have on offer is exposure to the elements, being able to interact with fire, being able to use water, being able to test the air and build sandcastles and so on with the earth, to look at identity, to look at concepts, and to look at the senses. So those are all aspects of the Playwork Curriculum. We give kids an opportunity to build, to use tools, to experiment with fire. We use loose parts. We give kids an opportunity to experience risk in their play. That's what gives them the adrenaline as well as learning about risk. And lots of other things like change and water and air and earth and concepts and fairy landscapes and so on as well. They all make up the Playwork Curriculum, and that gives us one framework to help to make sure that the play that's on offer for kids is a good range of play. Some of you will have heard of Bob Hughes' 16 play types, the taxonomy of play types, and they're all 16 represented there. Of course, a play episode doesn't include just one of these. A play episode will include lots of these. But as a framework for ensuring a range of play, this is a great framework. I worked in after schools before went back into Playboard. And we had that on the back of the door of our store. And every day when we were putting the equipment away, we brought down into a box all the play types that we felt the kids had had an opportunity to experience that day. And that left a number of play types, like, for example, maybe deep play or risky play. And that helped us plan for the equipment that we would leave out the next day so that the children would get an opportunity to engage in some risky play. So that might have been just putting out a mattress for them to jump down onto from a tall cupboard or something. So it's a great framework, if you like, for helping children make sense. Helping ensure that there's a range of play available for kids. So that's play and the range of play that there needs to be available. You're already thinking, I'm sure, in your head, the interface then between Playwork and youth work. How do those things match in? Well, I'm a picture man, as you can tell. So and I'm also continuum. They used to call me, it used to work in the Belfast, but it used to call me Mr. Continuum, Peter the Continuum. So here's a wee continuum. And if you like, it reflects maybe the age of the young person. So when we're talking about best meeting the needs of children, what we're suggesting is whenever children are young, their needs are primarily play-based needs. So they have a need to play, but play is also the best vehicle for them to have their needs met, particularly their developmental needs. Whereas as the kids get older, perhaps those youth work approaches are more appropriate for children. So you can see that at any point in the child's journey, of course, there'll be opportunities for children to play, but when they're young, play should be the main focus, particularly the play that we've talked about, the high value play of child-led play. It's not directed by adults, it's outside, it takes risks and so on and so on. So in many ways, if we consider a continuum where at an earlier age, play is the thing for children. But as they get older, we recognize then that play becomes more of recreation, an opportunity for children to have fun, an opportunity for children perhaps to engage in physical activity, and where play becomes an accompaniment, where play becomes the jam almost to help engage with young people. So when you're delivering a group work session with a group of adolescents, you'll probably put some icebreakers in there and so on. Opportunities for children to play, to engage, help to engage with the young people. And certainly we've been doing that last wee while in our Youth at Play program. So what's the kind of similarities and differences between youth work and play work? I'm sorry if you did maths at school and Venn diagrams were like the worst thing you could ever see. Here's a couple of Venn diagrams, but they just illustrate what youth work and play work is. I suppose we would agree that the central theme for youth work is about personal and social development. It focuses, as you know, on building that young person's capacity to participate, those key factors, participate, test their boundaries and their beliefs, and accept and understand others. So the central theme for youth work is about personal and social development. It's quite directed in that sense. Whereas play work is a much more generic central theme, and that is play. Remember, it's an instinctive behavior. So it's a need that needs to be met, particularly for younger children. But it's a behavior that helps them develop then to learn about themselves and about the world around them and their position in it. So that's one distinction between youth work. You could argue between youth work and play work. Here's a couple more. Youth work's about helping people to collect the knowledge and skills and confidence to make informed choices about their lives. Absolutely. So what's play work about then? Play work's about helping children and young people make informed choices about their play. But in doing so, it facilitates their capacity to be able to understand themselves better and understand the world about them better and feel more confident about taking that risk, about trying that thing out, So in other words, youth work can be seen as an early intervention for becoming an adult. We talk about early interventions all the time for 0 to 5-year-olds. Well, in many ways, youth work is early intervention for adulthood, where they get a chance to test those boundaries and check out their identity and et cetera, et cetera. Well, Playwork in some ways is the same, except at an earlier age, can be seen as the early intervention for becoming an adolescent. It's preparation for adolescence. Play gives kids and young people the opportunity to prepare for those challenges that they have in terms of choices about life and about behavior and so on that they have to make in adolescence. So those are some of the differences. And of course, some of the similarities then, which we'd probably recognize, youth work and play work is about affording children and young people agency, the importance of participation, the importance of control, the importance of being in charge. So it gives young people an opportunity to have agency over what's important to them. So it's about voluntary participation. Both youth work and play work support the notion of children choosing to get involved, not just to get involved, but also the manner of the involvement and the direction in which that involvement might go. It's also about giving kids experiences. The Paul Piaget comes to mind here when we talk about learning by doing. Youth work and play work is about giving kids the opportunity to experience, to feel, to try things out. So I go too far there. So when we're talking about play work and youth work, in many ways, there are a number of. I'm just going to stop sharing for a wee minute so I can see you all. Yeah. So as Jackie and hopefully illustrated to you, there are key aspects of play work that are succinct to play work, as there are with youth work. But there are lots of overlaps and similarities as well. What we're talking about is meeting the needs, the appropriate needs of children and young people. And we're arguing that the best way to meet the appropriate needs of children is through play. But that's what we're talking about. I know that I think Paul, Arlene would talk about the Youth at Play programme. We'll have some comments from some of the people who have been involved in the Youth at Play programme, but maybe it would be useful to wait and do them after your description of what the Youth at Play programme was about.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, thank you, Peter and Jackie. Thanks so much for that really comprehensive, I think, insight into play and the importance of play, and really valuable, Peter, to make those comparisons between play work and youth work, and where we're saying primarily there's so much that is similar in each. Really, the differences in terms of the age range, and I suppose that's one of the key points that we need to make. If people are happy enough, I am going to open the floor now to Arlene Key. Arlene is the Assistant Director for Children and Young People's Services, Youth Services with the Education Authority in Northern Ireland, and has held the role for the past 5 years, with over 20 years experience in the Education Authority and the former Education and Library Boards, where she was head of youth, and 7 years before that as head of CAMS and EOTIS, which is the Education Other Than at School. She's a member of the EA Senior Management Team and contributes to the strategic leadership of the authority, and a key focus is the transformation of educational services to meet ever-changing and complex needs of children and young people. So Arlene, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mary. That was a very interesting introduction to myself. I think the most important thing for everybody in the call to know is that I am absolutely to my core a youth worker, and delighted to be able to facilitate this conversation today along with you. Paul, you have some slides that you're going to share with us as well. Just while Paul's starting to share the slides, I want to say a couple of things. First of all, a big thank you to Jacqueline and her team, because we were in a very interesting space in Northern Ireland with a whole review of funding and what was youth work and what wasn't. And as many of you would know, probably looking maybe some of you quite close to the border and feel that you can really sense what's going on in Northern Ireland. And for those of you further away, play has never been more important than it is now for young people, because of the environment that we're in politically, in terms of the economy, in terms of the social tensions, the political tensions in our communities. And in particularly, our young people have talking to us about how school for them has added additional pressures in terms of their mental health and well-being. So play is very important to us. And what Paul and I want to talk to you about is really, why did we go down this route and ensure that we had this, for us, very important connection. So Paul, if you want to go to the next slide, please.
Yeah.
So for those of you who don't know, our policy in the north of Ireland is actually a very big enabler for us. And this is what it says. It says that you provide services based on assessed need. And I would just like to say, first of all, how fantastic is that? That is because you can look across government and understand what everybody's doing with young people. You can also respond to assessed needs in the local area, and you can engage with young people on an ongoing basis. So therefore you plan on a 3-year basis, but you make sure that you're able to respond to ongoing issues that can pop up in local communities or with certain cohorts of young people. And we identified, we go through in this year that we're in now, 21-22, nearly 22-23, we are going through a whole process of engagement right across government, across our community and with young people to identify the needs for the next 3 years. And in our regional youth development plan for 2023, we identified that play and the importance of play and the engagement with young people and early intervention, all the things that have been said was really important. And this is very, very interesting as well. We have a Chief Inspector's report. So all youth services in Northern Ireland are subject to inspection by the government. And every 2 years, the Chief Inspector looks across all of schools, all of youth service, and they write a report which is age specific. And that report really brings together the key themes from service delivery. And the Chief Inspector's report identified that the youth service really needed to do a bit more thinking, have a bit more reflection on the programme of offer for the priority age band 9 to 13 and just coming up into the age of 9 from 7. So that gave us a really important, and as Jacqueline says, there was a question really, is play youth work? And coming into the formation of our new funding scheme, we were thinking, my goodness, what do we do about this? And it became very evident to us, we had a piece of work to do to prove what the Connect was and to prove the value of the Connect to youth work. And these were the key drivers to enable us to do that. We also have a children and young people strategy. And one of the key outcomes of that is our commitment to young people in terms of play and leisure. And obviously from 21, 22, 23, and as we have gone through this worldwide pandemic and the need to be outside, the need for young people to have connection, the need for young people to get close to their environment, all of that has only enhanced the direction of travel that we have gone down and really given us the sense that we were absolutely right to do this. So really what we have tried to do with our, we haven't tried to do it, we've been very successful with the support of our colleagues, is that we have linked the participation of children and young people from youth work right through to the play outcomes that has been outlined to you. And very importantly, we've tried to get into the space of the 4 to 13-year-olds, and for us in particular, 9 to 13-year-olds, which is a priority age band. We have tried to invest a huge amount of creativity and determination about what exactly the curriculum offer is. a very important aspect, if you haven't seen the research that the Edinburgh University completed, please look at it. We are also completing a piece of research in this area. But we know if we do not invest in generic universal provision or open access youth work, the absolute need for providing more intensive, more expensive, more detrimental to the young person, family and community becomes. In terms of outcomes, we need to make sure that we absolutely make sure that our money and our effort is going into access for all and to young people. And then very importantly, this was a big investment on our staff in terms of this programme, and our staff really enjoyed it. There's some very good reports that are written that I'm sure we'll be happy to share with you. But our staff got a real sense of, number one, in terms of their curriculum, their journey, reconnecting their own personal social development, their real emphasis of why they were in youth work, that all got revitalised through this piece of work. But more than that, we were able to give them accredited and non-accredited opportunities for formal training that I'm sure are very applicable and we would love to share with you. Thank you, Paul, if you want to move on.
Yeah.
Last slide. You go ahead.
Sorry. So part of obviously what Peter was alluding to there too, as we entered into this process, this is the plan for 20 to 23. And testing this process, we entered into a pilot project with Playboard here in regards to looking at an urban area and a rural area, I guess is the best way to articulate it, and developing up not only an accredited option for staff, but also re-energizing staff, like that workforce development element about how do you bring play into your day-to-day life as a youth worker. And part of that learning also was kind of connecting that to a youth worker who's an adult connecting to their inner child. And that in itself brings about an element of motivation and drive to actually do this work with children and young people as well. But one of the things that's quite pertinent, we could have approached play work from the perspective of its generic, that universal side of things. It's something that happens in the space within the club. But what the pilot project has really demonstrated to us, and what I'm trying to highlight here at the individual identification and need, is that continuum that Jackie and Peter were relating to there, that continuum of play is valid in all our young people as they go through the developmental stages. And this is something we've seen reflected very clearly here in Northern Ireland with the emotional health and wellbeing framework, where they have wellbeing for all, early support and enhanced support. And even when you take play for a second, having under 10s, I know that's the focus of your discussions today, under 10s having the opportunity to play, bring about that element of contributing to nurture education, building the resilience, helping them to understand problem solving, all play brings into this. And I think what's really conversely apparent though is when you look at our teenagers now and you look at what's absent with a lot of teenagers, you know, that there's high levels of anxiety, that they're uncomfortable in social situations, particularly new environments. So we have missed something within that space. And if I relate it to the emotional health and wellbeing framework for a second, what you see with that is there's more focus on well-being for all, that the idea that we foster an environment and a culture of positive peer relationships where mental health is talked about and where play, for example, happens, that we're creating an environment for further down the line, those acute services, which Arlene alluded to, being more expensive, more intensive, and always having a waiting list, if we be honest, that young people their needs aren't being catered later in life. So it's really important in that under 10 and that 90-13 for us in Northern Ireland to make sure that play becomes part of the fabric of youth work as opposed to more something that's done in a particular space and time, and enabling our workers to do that. And the one thing I would add too is that there's a real benefit we play, that play is not expensive to do. Play is about skills. Play is not about a resource kit. Play, what we have learned through the pilot is everything's lying around your youth centre, youth project already, and it's about creating it from the ground up. And a lot of that came out through play audits that were as part of the pilot, looking at what play happens within centres and where the opportunities exist for play, and helping to kind of put a frame and a picture around that for staff to realise that this is possible and it's not a resource heavy led thing. So the workforce development element is quite key in helping staff to see that this is at their fingertips for one, but also how to use and utilise what they can do within their skills and give them confidence to do it as well. So our pilot and where we're at here in Northern Ireland has moved on to the next phase, and the big recognition for us is capacity of staff. And what we're kind of working on at the minute is through a funding opportunity here in Northern Ireland for the 22-23 period. And I put in the there, and I think that's a COVID thing for me. I mean, it's not that people weren't doing this, but it's to actually bring about an energy and a conversation about how we do this again and getting people to focus back in and the opportunity to play happens. So it's about engaging with the youth sector on the use of play and looking at accredited training options for part-time staff and volunteers and a higher level of accreditation for full-time staff, that we're creating some currency as well for staff to buy into the process, that they're benefiting personally also from it in their continuous professional development. And I think this is really the first phase of this. This is an element for me that we're starting to start the conversation. We're starting to build up the skills of staff again and look at, in a post-COVID world, how play can really contribute to wider outcomes for children and young people, particularly on that continuum of support. And although we are focusing on like the under 10s, and you yourself probably experienced it, I've been through that exercise with Jackie and Peter a few times about think back to when you were a kid, to do that trick of getting you to reconnect to your inner child. And it does kind of bring back warm fuzzies, for example, inside you. There's a benefit for our staff in a post-COVID world that they have been working flat out and have been meeting the needs of all of our communities, not just our young people, our communities in some cases in isolation, that they're quite exhausted. They're quite kind of, tired, and we've lost volunteers and all of that in the wider scope. But by bringing in that play, even just for them as an experience, is going to have a wider knock-on effect of actually how our staff feel about the role they do in youth work as well. But I would never dismiss an 18-year-old or a 17-year-old playing Kirby, because when we look at complex life issues and social issues that some of our young people are facing, actually helping them reconnect to their own inner child, albeit an adolescent, has got a lot of value as well in regards to the delivery of youth work, whether it's targeted or generic. Arlene, if you want to add anything to that, that's our last slide there.
Just to say, we're committed to this long term, and sometimes when we try things out, we do things and we evaluate